Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you need anything done at your house, like new construction projects, maybe some flooring, maybe a roofing? Check out K&H Contracting. They're a local company. Chris really cares about this community, has been involved in this community of Ellis County for quite some time, his entire life. So if you are looking for a local contractor or somebody that can help you out with some of your projects, please look them up and check them out. Anyway, today my very special guest is Mr. Terry Tucker. Now, I wanted to have Terry Tucker on because he fits into those extraordinary or those motivational, aspirational things when people go through things, and they're the compelling stories that I love told on this show. So thank you so much, Terry, for coming on.
Well, DV, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you.
Thank you so much. We were scheduled before, so I do appreciate you because life popped in and I was unable to get you in. So I appreciate your time, sir. I'd like for my audience to know more about you. Can you give them an intro on you?
Sure. So I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You can't tell this from looking at me or from my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and actually went to college at the Citadel in Charleston, South Carolina on a basketball scholarship. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm really going to date myself now, but this was long before the internet was available to help people find employment. I was very lucky. My first job out of college was in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain, in their marketing department. That was the good news. The bad news was I lived with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mother care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. After Wendy's, I actually went to work for the hospital that cared for my father and my grandmother. And then at 37, made a major pivot in my life and became a police officer. And part of what I did during my law enforcement career was I was a SWAT hostage negotiator. After that, I started a school security consulting business, coached girls high school basketball when we lived in Houston. But for the last 12 years now, I've been battling a rare form of cancer, a rare form of melanoma. And then I guess just finally, my wife and I have been married for 31 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is an officer in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Wow. Wow, you have lived quite a life there. You've done a little bit of everything. High school basketball coach for young ladies, SWAT. You have been busy in your life. Thank you. Thank your daughter for her service as her brother, her Navy brother. I do appreciate her service very much.
Yep, we're all in this together, right?
Yes, we are. She may be Air Force. They still do something. We give each other kinds of crap. I want to tell you, God bless you in surviving so far your journey with cancer. What was that like? Because I've lost people to cancer recently. Within the last 2 years, I lost my aunt and a very dear brother in arms that passed on. And I hate cancer with a passion. It has taken people I loved very much away from me. So what happens to you when you get told, hey, you got this rare cancer and we don't know what's going to happen? What was that day like?
It was funny because they told me they do know what's going to happen. So I have a rare form of melanoma, and most people think of melanoma as too much exposure to the sun. It affects the melanin, the pigment in our skin. Mine has nothing to do with sun exposure. I have a rare form that appeared on the bottom of my foot. It usually either appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And I was coaching girls high school basketball in Houston when I had this callus break open on the bottom of my foot. And I didn't think of it, really, I didn't pay much attention to it until a couple of weeks later, it still hadn't healed. So I made an appointment and went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine. And he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you got a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. No dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I get the call from him that we all dread. And as I said, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having explaining to me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming. Until finally, he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years, and I have never seen the form of cancer that you have. You have this incredibly rare form of melanoma. And he suggested I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston to be treated. And I did. And they removed the tumor on the bottom of my foot, all the lymph nodes in my groin. And then they looked at me, DV, and they said, you'll probably be dead in 2 years.
What? They do all that and say, oh, yeah, you're going to go.
Exactly. And I thought, you gave me a death sentence. Maybe I can try to turn that death sentence into a life sentence. And that's really what I've been trying to do over these last 12 plus years now. Obviously, I've beaten the odds. And that's the thing about doctors. I always consider them, they're like Vegas. They're like handicapping a game. They're like, okay, based on your age and your health condition and the stage of your cancer, we project you're going to live X. But what doctors don't know is that you want to see your kid graduate from high school. You want to see your kid graduate from college. You want to walk your daughter down the aisle. You want to play with your grandkids someday. And those events in your mind are very powerful and can keep people going. And I just didn't take the doctor's prediction. But I also, on the flip side of that, know that doctors have said to people, and I know these people, and you probably do as well, hey, you've got 2 years to live. And almost to the day on that 2-year anniversary, they die. They just take what the doctor says and do that. I've always wanted my life to be based on the decisions that I made, not on the ones that I didn't make or that somebody else made for me.
So take me through that. Did you end up getting chemo or radiation? Is that how they treat melanoma too? Or
so what they initially did was put me on a drug called interferon.
Oh.
And because they really had nothing to give me. As my doctor used to call interferon, we're trying to kick the can down the road.
Oh, okay.
And I took a weekly interferon injection. And I had a terrible case of the flu for 2 to 3 days every week after that. And I took those weekly injections for almost 5 years. So imagine having a lousy case of the flu every week for 5 years. And eventually the interferon got so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a body temperature of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with.
That's like fatal.
It is totally fatal. And somehow I survived that. So obviously I can't take interferon anymore. It's way too toxic. They tried some biologic therapy, which didn't work. And so in 2018, I had my left foot amputated. Cancer worked its way up my leg. 2019, 2 more surgeries. And then in 2020, in the middle of the COVID pandemic, I found out that my entire lower leg was full of cancer, and I had tumors in my lungs. And so during the pandemic, I had to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I still have tumors in my lungs, which I'm treated for every 3 months at the hospital, every 3 weeks at the hospital.
How do you find this out? You're having your leg, and I'm sorry that you've had to deal with that, but you have your leg amputated. You're 6'8" guy who's been athletic your whole life, and you've done things like SWAT. That requires some kind of stamina that to be a police officer, just in general. And you've lived that life, and then you've been this coach, and then they take your leg off. What was that journey like?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Most of my life, I played college basketball. I was a physical individual. I had done physical things most of my life. And now you're going to amputate my leg and I'm going to be in a wheelchair. So how do you balance that? And I think when you can't do what you're good at, you do what's important in life. And I really feel now I am doing what's important. People always say, I'm sorry you have cancer. I'm not. And don't get me wrong, I'm not happy that I have it. But I think a couple things. One, I don't think you really know yourself in life until you've been tested by some form of adversity within your life. And 2, cancer's made me a better human being. And I've been asked, if you could live your life over again without having all these body parts lopped off and with the 5 years of interferon, would you do it again? Without the cancer, I wouldn't. Cancer's made me a better human being. It sucked, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, I think it's, and I have a very strong faith in God. I think it's a way for God to use my infirmity to show his kindness, his love, his compassion, and things like that. So I am not at all saying, hey, I wish I didn't have this. And I've never said, why me? Why not me? Why not? Why shouldn't I have cancer? What makes me any more special than anybody that you know or anybody that I know? You know what? If somebody can benefit from my cancer, I'm all for trying to get them to do that.
I was going to ask you, how do you find purpose in the midst of that? But it sounds like you took your faith in God and expanded that and really dove in to God and his mercy and even his will. When you have a sickness like this, I think it's the most human. You don't say, why me? I have said, why me for less? And wondered what God's plan was in that. And it seems like you've trusted in his plan. And I love how you said that in my weakness, his strength, paraphrasing,
Sure.
because I've used that in some of my health ailments. And so did that journey with God come during the storm, or it was before the storm and it helped sustain you?
It was before the storm. And I guess I don't want your audience to think that I've never yelled at him. I've never, during that 5-year period of interferon where I had the flu every week, I was so sick of being sick that I prayed to die. I felt that there were sort of two camps. There was the living and there was the not dying. And I wasn't in the living camp. I was absolutely in the not dying camp. If you would have asked me my goals back then, I'd been like, my goal is if I get up tomorrow morning, I'm going to find a way to figure out a way to live. But I may not get up tomorrow morning because I feel so sick. And so it was like, look, God, just take me out of this. Be done with this. Let my family get on with their lives. Obviously, he didn't do that, but he did give me the strength. He did give me the courage. He did give me the love to continue to move forward. And it's funny because when it's not really funny, but when I had my leg amputated and I found I had these tumors that I still have in my lungs, my doctor showed me my CAT scan. And DV, I don't know how to read a CAT scan. I never went to medical school or anything like that. But, I had these big tumors in my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces on the outside of my lungs.
Yeah.
And I remember looking at my doctor and saying, how was I alive? And I will never forget this till the day I die. He put his head down. He shook his head no. And then he looked up at me and he said, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been. Which said to me, God's not done with me yet. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. Don't spend a lot of time worrying about the dying. Spend more time focused on trying to live the best life that I can live.
In my darkest times, and when I reached out to God, and specifically about 7 years ago, and when I turned my journey to Christ and I decided I would never turn away, it was the biggest thing that I was dealing with was finding my purpose, or first of all, forgiving myself because God forgave me, and then finding my purpose as I went on. And that was a big one. And God showed me the purpose. He showed me what he wanted me to do. So in all this stuff that you've dealt with, what did God show you was your purpose?
It's funny. I think a lot of times we talk about that word purpose and we talk about it in the singular, like it's one thing. And at least for me, and maybe you feel this way as well, I think that word for me has been plural. It's been purpose is. I think when I was younger, I really felt my purpose was to be an athlete and to do those kind of things. And then as I got older and I got into life, so to speak, I really felt my purpose was to be in law enforcement, was to help people, being a cop. And now, in all honesty, as I'm probably coming towards the end of my life, I think my purpose has shifted again to putting as much goodness, positivity, motivation, love back into the world with whatever time I have left. And so it's really, I just am open to what he wants me to do. And I've said this, I've probably done more living in the 12 years that I've been dying of cancer than I've done in my entire life. And I've had a pretty good life up until I had cancer. So I feel very fortunate with the things that I'm still able to do today.
What I found too, and when you say that, I found that when I got in this journey and the purposes that you said, purposes, mine, it was, and I had my professional purpose and stuff, that stuff was already in play. But just what did you want me to do with this thing life? I mean, you've let me survive. Right. Okay. So what do you want me to do? And he's put it on my heart to be kind,
Mhm.
love on people, be a blessing, help when you can, and live your life that way. Live your life with humility, and I will bless you. And he has blessed me beyond measure. And I think of it this way, where I hope that if God forbid that was his plan for me, and I got an ailment that that, I would have that strength and fortitude in him that you have, that poise that you show in him, because I've seen that in other believers in their worst possible times. And I could only pray that God gives me that kind of strength when that time, if that time comes. So it's wonderful to see it in you. So now you got these things in your lungs. What are you doing nowadays? What's going on in your life?
So I'm treated at the hospital every 3 weeks. I've been on a trial drug, which is interesting. It does nothing to the cancer, but the way cancer proliferates in your body is it secretes an enzyme or a protein that hides itself from your immune system. And what this drug does is go in and wipe out that protein or enzyme. Your immune system, just if you had a cold or a flu virus, could say, hey, that doesn't belong here. We need to attack it. So I still have the tumors in my lungs, but my own body, my own immune system is keeping those tumors in check. They're still there, but they haven't grown and they haven't gone anywhere else. So, from a medical point of view, that's pretty much what I do. Now, the treatment beats me up pretty well, so I get 2 weeks off. And when I do that, I do podcasts. I've been a guest on we're probably approaching 700 podcasts all around the world with different people. Obviously, being in a wheelchair and an amputee, it's hard for me to travel, but I can do a podcast with somebody in Australia or Africa or India or China. And I get the benefit of talking to those people without having to actually go to those countries. And it's been so amazing for me. The other thing, I've written a book. I've just finished writing a second book that I'm hoping to have published next year. So all these things that I never expected to write a book ever in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'm doing that. And it's just, I just leave myself open. It's like, all right, God, what do you want me to do today? Show me what you want me to do. I'm putting it in your hands. You tell me what you want me to do, and I will do it.
Before I go into these books, I wanted to ask you, because this is important. I've been with my wife a very long time. I'm in that 27. I'm not quite as long as you, but I'm in that 27-year range. And I love my wife. She's my person. I just don't want to ever do life without her.
Mm-hmm.
And so you understand, when you've been together with somebody this long, you understand what I'm talking about. That person could be in the house and that's just enough. That person is there. So how has she dealt with this? Has she leaned on her faith, and how does she go on this journey with you?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I always say I married up, she married down. I mean,
Yeah. No, hey, you know what? If it wasn't for women and their pity on ugly guys, we would just be running around just lost in the world. I married up.
So yeah, I think cancer or any kind of a chronic or a terminal illness, I think initially it isolates you from your friends, then it isolates you from your family, and then I think if it goes long enough, it isolates you from yourself. And I'll give you a story. So when I had these tumors in my lungs, I had my leg amputated. My doctor wanted to start me on chemo, and I remember saying to him, "Is it going to save my life?" He said, probably not, but it might buy you some more time. And I said, if the outcome is going to be the same, whether I take it or not, if I'm going to die, I would rather spend whatever time I have with my family and be in a better state of health. But I'll go home and talk to my family about it. And this is a true story. It's a funny story, but it really happened this way. And so I go home and I start telling my wife and daughter about what the doctor is recommending. And my daughter's immediately, all right, we need a family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. It's not like we got a board here or something like that. And so we sit around the kitchen table and individually talk about how we all feel about me having chemo. And when we're done with that, my daughter again is like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and daughter raise their hand. I'm like, wait a minute. Am I getting outvoted for something I don't want to do? And I remember, exactly. I'm like, are you kidding me? But I remembered when I was back in the police academy, our defensive tactics instructor used to have us bring a photograph of the people we love the most to class. And as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, we were to look at that photograph, because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So I ended up taking chemotherapy, not because I wanted to, but because I love my wife and daughter more than I love myself. And in hindsight, it was the right thing to do. It was the bridge that got me to this clinical trial drug that I've been on for the last 4 years. So I always say, without my wife and daughter, there's absolutely no way you and I would be having this discussion, because I wouldn't be here right now.
It is God gave us our helpmate, and they go along this journey with us. And these women, sometimes they're right, and sometimes we should listen to them. So every once in a while, we should just go ahead and just listen. Sometimes we're boneheads about that. So tell me about this book that you wrote, and then the book that you're going to.
So I wrote a book called Sustainable Excellence: The 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And there's an old joke that says, when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God never told me to, hey, write a book. But I think what God did, and this has happened to me other times in my life, is put enough people in my path that start to make the same suggestion over and over. You should write a book. You should write a book. You should write a book. And I think now that I'm older, I'm smart enough that I pay attention when that happens. And so Sustainable Excellence was really born out of 2 conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school, who'd moved to the area in Colorado where my wife and I live with her fiance. And the 4 of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her after dinner that I was excited that she was living close and I could watch her find and live her purpose. And DV, she got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason or the reasons you were put on the face of this earth. And there are those reasons, using your unique gifts and talents and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man reach out to me on social media from college. And he said, what do you think are the most important things that I need to learn, not to just be successful in my job or in business, but to be successful in life? And I didn't want to give him the get up early, work hard, help others. I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time taking some notes and eventually had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I stepped back and I was like, all right, I've got a life story that fits underneath this principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates that principle. So literally during the 4 to 5 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how Sustainable Excellence came to be.
Wow. I love that. It's just crazy that you came together and decided to put a book. And the thing about a book is that we're reading books from 1,000 years, 2,000 years old. But the books will outlast us, that written word. So what you've put out into the world will outlast you, and it will benefit people, because that finding that reason, finding that purpose, living that kind of life is so. A lot of and you find this a lot with the younger generation, especially, they believe that life is just here now, material. There's nothing more than what they have and what's in front of them. So there's no hope in their life. There's no expectation of anything getting better or anything good. It's just here now. This is the suck. It's going to be it. And they go into this cycle and they break down. Our kids are full of anxiety. Our kids are just full of depression and aimless, rudderless, and unable to get things. It's always good to see somebody putting out in the world how to get along with that. Now, on your second book, what did you take up?
So the second book, when I released Sustainable Excellence, it's a book about how I think, and again, there's a bunch of these type of books out there, how I think people can be successful. But as soon as I published it, there was a yearning that, okay, there's another book that's in me, and it's also about another word that begins with the letter S, and that word is significance. And so success is what we do for ourselves. Significance is what we do for other people. So this book, which I've literally just finished right now, is titled 4 Truths and a Lie. And it's really about what you talked about. And I've seen so many people, and it sounds like you have too, that feel like they're born empty. And that when they get into life, they get out of school, get into life, whatever that looks like for them, that then their job is to fill up their empty self. I want to have the best education, drive the nicest car, live in the nicest house, have the latest gadgets and gizmos.
And end up more empty.
Exactly. Because there's always one more thing. There's always one more thing that you can get. And what I found, DV, is it's just the opposite. We're not born empty. We're born full with everything we need to be successful in life already inside of us. We just need to find it, pull it out, and use it for our benefit. So our job in life should not be to fill ourselves up. Our job in life should be to empty ourselves out with our unique gifts and talents, certainly for the betterment of ourselves, but also for the betterment of our families, of our friends, and of our communities. And I hope that's what this book will impart to the people who read it.
What was the lie?
The lie is that we judge our self-worth based on the material things that we have.
And you would understand this more because you have a value of life that's just beautiful. And it's a unique thing that people with illnesses like yours get. My friend Chris, he was like that too. Before he passed, he just had this extraordinary look at life that you get when you're facing that. It's I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought on that. It happens. I'm caught up in it, in what you're saying. Do you see how do you get people to understand that they don't need these things to fill them up? Because the whole society and the world tells you that you need more. It's got to be bigger, better, stronger, whatever. Everything is always more and more. And this is what society, social media, everything pumps into these people, especially these young people. So how do you convince somebody in that book that's not the way?
I think part of how I do it outside the book is, hey, here's me, here's my life. Let my life be a product of what I am espousing. And in the book, it's just a lot of stories. And I always heard somebody say one time, never make a point without telling a story, and never tell a story without making a point. If I tell you a bunch of things, you might remember one or two of them. But if I tell you 4 or 5 things and I tell you a story about each of those things, there's a much greater chance that you will understand or you will remember those things. And I'll give you one of the stories that I absolutely love. You and I are old enough to remember Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood.
Of course. Right.
So when Fred Rogers died in 2003, his family was going through his effects, and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers has written 4 simple words: life is for service. And I think when we understand that, it's not what we get. There's a great story about Alexander the Great, probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest conqueror of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Probably killed more people than Hitler did.
Mm-hmm.
A very simple story. So Alexander the Great is dying, and he calls his counselors around. He said, I want you to carry out my final 3 wishes. He said, my first wish is I only want my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave. The second wish is I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones. And the third wish is I want my hands to be hanging outside of my casket or my coffin. One of his counselors steps forward and says, excuse me, you're Alexander the Great. You're the most powerful man in the world. These seem like my words, not his, kind of goofy wishes. Mm-hmm. And he said, why do you want these? He said, number one, I want my doctors to carry my casket to the grave because I want people to understand that no doctor heals anybody. They just help the body to heal itself. So be very careful how you treat yourself, how you eat, how you get enough rest, how you exercise. Number 2, I've spent my entire life conquering, accumulating all kinds of massive amounts of wealth. And yet none of that wealth is coming with me beyond the grave. I want people to understand that it's foolish to spend your life trying to get all that wealth, all that power, all that influence. And then finally, I came into this world empty-handed, and I leave it the same way. And I'm sure that's not a true story, but it's a great story to let people understand that all these things that we go after, and as you mentioned, there's always one more thing to get. Oh, if I get this next thing, then I'll be happy. Then you get it and you're not happy. So you look for that next thing. It's not about what you get. It's about taking your unique gifts and talents and giving those to other people. When you make that shift, when you make that paradigm change in your brain, it's amazing how much better your life is.
As you look at your mortality, when your time comes and you go see Jesus, what do you want him to say about you? And what do you want the world to say about you?
I could care less what the world says about me. Honestly, I don't think 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember that I was here. And that's fine with me. But what I'd like now is to have those deep connections with other people. There's a psychology professor at the University of Chicago who does this experiment with his students, and he does it himself just to keep himself fresh with it. The idea is you go out, you get on a bus, and in 3 questions, you're deep with somebody. So you get on a bus, you sit down next to somebody, and you say, "Hey, DV, how's it going?" "It's going fine." That's question 1. Question 2, what do you do for a living? And I'm just making this up. "I'm a doctor." "Oh." Question 3, have you always wanted to be a doctor? "No, I grew up on a farm. I wanted to be a vet, but X, Y, and Z happened." Or, "Yes, my mom was a surgeon and I wanted to follow in her footsteps because she died of cancer." Whatever it is, now you're deep with another human being. And social media allows us to stay on the surface. We never go deep with people. So I want to have deep relationships while I'm here. And then I hope what Jesus says to me is, "Well done, good and faithful servant. Come on home."
Man, I've said this before, but I love very few people get to say that they make humanity better with their life.
Yeah.
And with your limited life, you can say that. And I'm sure Jesus will say that about you when you go and see him. I'm a better person because I got to talk to you. And there's definitely so much honor in knowing somebody is taking their time that is limited, and we're all limited, but when you see that coming and you're trying to do better, that's just it. To me, it's amazing. On my show, and unfortunately I could talk to you all night, but on my show I am coming towards the end. On my show, I always give my guest the last word. So I want you to talk to my viewers because you have so much to say and with so much beauty in it. I just want you to speak to my viewers.
Sure. I'll leave you with one more story, if you don't mind.
I like those.
I love reading. And Ernest Hemingway is probably one of our greatest writers of all times. And he wrote a book called Farewell to Arms, which is a semi-autobiographical book about his time as an ambulance driver with the Italian army during World War I. And there's a line in that book that I absolutely love. And the line is this: "Life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places." I think that's such a metaphor for life. Just if you were to break your arm and a doctor would set it and put it in a cast, when that arm heals, your arm will be stronger at the spot where it was broken than the rest of the bone. That's the same way in life. We're going to have experiences where somebody close to us dies, where we unexpectedly get let go from our job, where we find out we have a chronic or a terminal illness. All those things are going to happen to us more than likely in our lives. But if you can keep moving forward, if you can rely on something that's bigger than ourselves, and I think for you and I, it's our faith. I know there are a lot of people out there that don't believe in that. Whatever's bigger than yourself, rely on that. Because if you can keep moving forward and come out the other end, you will be a stronger and more resilient human being. And you will also be better at helping other people.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is true. Thank you so much again for coming on the show. I'd love to have you on again one day and talk about how things are going, and then talk more about your other book and talk about the next book. You're going to buy it right after that because God's still got plans for you. And I got a feeling that your faith is going to lead you where he wants you. So thanks a lot so much for coming on the show.
Well, DV, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed talking with you.
Can you stick around real quick after the show? Thank
Sure.
you.